For nearly a decade, Turn 10 were one of the busiest game developers in the world. Starting late in the original Xbox's life cycle, they drove straight through the gates on fire with the 360, producing 3 Forza Motorsport titles, each one getting progressively better, with 2011's Motorsport 4 considered the best of the franchise to this day. It had a huge number of cars, all given real attention to detail, a lot of them are fun to drive, plenty of different game modes, and of course, the involvement of Top Gear at the peak of its popularity.
It's not such a good idea if your last name is something stupid, like Shufflebottom or Death.
It was simply the best alternative to Gran Turismo you could ask for if you only had an Xbox 360. And then you had Forza Horizon, which took the features, cars, and driving mechanics of Motorsport, made it more arcade-styled, and set it on an open-world map like Need for Speed or Midnight Club, and is on par with Motorsport 4 as one of the best on the 360. The Forza franchise as a whole was in a very good place at the end of the 7th generation. So you might think going into the next one it would be more of the same with better graphics. Well, kind of. Rumors of another Forza Motorsport follow-up being under development began as early as September 2012, just before the first Forza Horizon title, when a job offer from Microsoft was listed on their website and rumored as a launch title for the upcoming Xbox 720 on April 2013, featuring super lifelike graphics. Even McLaren Automotive posted on their Facebook page that Xbox is revealing something special, we might think you like what they're announcing. And a month later, Microsoft confirmed that Forza Motorsport 5 would be released for the successor of the 360, with a trailer planned to be premiered at E3 2013. And anyone who knows their gaming history will never forget how much of a train wreck it was for Microsoft, so much so it deserves its own video in a future Xbox One console review. During the press conference, figures of Microsoft spent the first half an hour talking about all the features of the system that had nothing to do with video games, but it was things like always requiring an internet connection and the Kinect to use the console, and a game sharing system rendering physical copies useless that irked players to the point where the choice for them was obvious. And though Microsoft would reverse a lot of those controversial features, the company's perception was enough for Sony to win the console war that generation based on sales figures. And looking at the launch titles for the Xbone, this was it. Most of them were still available on the previous generation, and if you narrow it down to Xbox One exclusives, yeah. To be fair, the PS4 was pretty lackluster as well, but Forza Motorsport 5 was really the only exclusive launch title that was worth paying attention to. Turn 10 confirmed F1 and IndyCars for the first time, as well as all 3 hosts of Top Gear making an appearance. And promotion included a V8 Supercars Bathurst 1000 wildcard entry as Xbox One Racing, since Mount Panorama is a new circuit for the game, and they even made a short film using frames of a demo of Motorsport 5 scattered all over a racetrack, and used the McLaren 12C with a 35mm camera above it, making it the fastest camera car in the world at the time, their own circuit-sized Zoetrope, which looks spectacular. Certainly a more exciting way to promote the next generation than Microsoft could at E3. However, when Turn 10 announced this new Forza title would only include 200 cars and 14 circuits total, which is less than the first Forza Motorsport title on the original Xbox, it looked even more problematic. Dan Greenawalt explains that a lot of the circuits around that time that were in the game, like Silverstone and Indianapolis, received a lot of updates which required them to fully redesign the entire circuit from scratch. And they were only given less than a year to develop it because Microsoft wanted a high-profile exclusive on launch day, so they had to learn how to develop a brand new system, with each model given the most detail to showcase what this next generation can do. Forza Motorsport 5 was released on November 22nd, 2013, on launch day. Again, because I chose the PlayStation 4 over the Xbox One, I never got into the Forza series that generation. Like, it genuinely took me until 2018 to play my first Forza Motorsport title. So this and the Xbox One just slipped my mind mostly. I only bought this game because I wanted to review the entire franchise in chronological order. The only thing I knew about this game before deciding to review it is how little content it has compared to the 360 titles. But you don't realize how much of a factor it plays in the overall experience until you've played it. Whenever I play a Forza game on Twitch and I said I was going to review Motorsport 5 next, to put it bluntly, they all said I'd hate it. But it's been 11 years now and I've got nearly every single Forza title in my collection. Is it still considered the worst? Or did Microsoft's reputation around that time overshadow a lot of its shine? Short answer, it is the worst Forza title I've played so far, but is it a bad video game? No, of course not.
This is a shrine to power, to speed, to metal made beautiful. This is where dreams are driven. Welcome to Forza.
Like previous Forza Motorsport and Horizon titles to an extent, the game begins with you driving the car on the cover arts as a way to showcase the graphics and gameplay right from the get-go. To give you a taste of what to expect from this game, the McLaren P1 at Prague, and a way to showcase the graphical details that can be done on the Xbox One, but not the 360, but I'll get to that later on. Then you have to select your first car. Again, no license test, just pick the car and go racing, which is just the way I like sim races. But one thing I noticed is how much more repetitive the career mode feels compared to previous Forza titles. And it took me a while to get my head around why, because on the surface, the type of events you compete in, it's organized in a way that you basically need a different car for each championship, including body type, class, and rating level. And in between the middle of them, you have bonus events like Cone Challenge, overtaking slower vehicles, bowling pins, all taken from Motorsport 4. Well, it's simple. There isn't enough content. There aren't enough cars and circuits. In some ways, it reminds me of Gran Turismo 3 A-Spec, which also took a nosedive in the vehicle count compared to GT2, but was equally as well received. So why does Motorsport 5 get ridiculed? It could be the massive step graphically from PS1 to PS2. It was that mind-blowing back then. The progression system, okay, that was very slow, but when you got a quick enough car, picking off events one by one is really addictive. You have rally events, all the cars are great to drive with each one satisfying to earn, and the soundtrack is top notch regardless of region. And also game reviewing landscape wasn't as critical at the time. Motorsport 5, even on the first championship, you're literally doing 8 races in one go and racing on circuits that are so large, the first couple of races can last over 5 minutes, which is longer than it sounds, I promise. There are new circuits in Motorsport 5, including Prague, Yas Marina, Spa, and Mount Panorama. That's what I'm talking about, down under, mate. But with many classics including Maple Valley, Hockenheim, Suzuka, and the hill climb sprints in Fujimi all omitted, it felt like by the time I cleared the first few events, I've already driven on every single racetrack in the entire game. Even Long Beach, Road America, and Nürburgring weren't originally on the game's release, which would have made it feel even more repetitive. At least in Gran Turismo 3, 16 of the 20 circuits in that game, yes, more than Motorsport 5, let's not forget, have reverse variations which felt unique enough to feel like you were racing on a different circuit. Because Motorsport 5 has a lot of the fictional circuits omitted, you have less reverse options. Prague, Burmese Alps, and short variations of the Top Gear test track have some of those options, but never get used enough in the career mode. This might explain why the championships have so many events in one go, so you're forced to use the same car for multiple races before moving on to the next one. It's a way to extend the gameplay time with the smaller vehicle count. I mean, I usually stick to the same car as long as I can when I play racing games in general, only trying to change it around to show different models for these reviews, but I'm getting that vibe in Motorsport 5 when I know content levels have dipped compared to Motorsport 4. Now, people have complained about 80% of the plus 1,000 cars in Gran Turismo 5 and 6 being rehashed models, and if you want just the premium ones, there's nothing stopping you from doing that. As I mentioned in my re-review of that game, it comes down to what you get out of it. A more diverse lineup of cars on the track at once, whereas some of the events in Motorsport 5, the spread of opponents on the track clearly isn't anywhere near as diverse as it should be. Basically, what we got here is Gran Turismo 5 if it only had premium models available. Including DLC, there are 325 vehicles total, which would have been a reasonable number on launch day. But with over 100 behind a paywall, imagine the total price of the whole package back then. And because it's been over a decade since its release, the DLC isn't available anymore, and what really sucks is not being able to access it even if you bought it in the past. Compare that to Gran Turismo 6, which has nearly 1,300 cars available, as well as releasing new content as free updates over time. Like the choice between Xbox One versus PlayStation 4, it couldn't be more one-sided. Dan Greenawalt also noted that DLC was planned before release to try and increase the number of content available, but it just sounds like another way for Microsoft to take more of your money than they deserve. And it shames me to admit this, but there would have been enough players who were willing to pay for the DLC for them to take the backlash head on, because it would have been more profitable, just like DLC and loot boxes in general. That's why publishers do it, no matter how much we complain about it. At least the variety of vehicles are decent thanks to the events available. This is the first Forza title to include open wheel races, including IndyCar and F1, including that year's Lotus, which was a decent car, especially with Iceman Kimi Raikkonen behind the wheel. The 1976 Ferrari and McLarens driven by Niki Lauda and James Hunt that same year, Rush, was released in cinemas. The IndyCars of Penske, Chip Ganassi and Andretti, V8 Supercars, and World Endurance Championship cars return. And in Free Run, everything is available from the start, so I found myself driving an F1 car at Spa, at Penske, IndyCar at Indy, an HRT V8 Supercar at Bathurst, and an Audi Le Mans racer at Circuit de la Sarthe in the span of about 20 minutes. So as something to just pick up and play depending on the type of motorsport you're into, at least there's something for everyone. Graphically, Forza Motorsport 5 does showcase what the Xbox One can do that the 360 can't. The steering jitters a little bit on the rough road, you can see the suspension go to work, the surface isn't 100% smooth, the windscreen reflects the dashboard when the interior view is selected. At the end of a race, you get a shot of the car collecting dirt from either the tarmac or gravel. Watching the car all detailed and scratched up like that does make the car look like a warrior on the battlefield. And if you look outside the circuit, you can spot helicopter flying over the road, balloons being let go in the stands, and the sunlight reflecting the buildings and glare on the screen. It's gorgeous, all remaining in an uninterrupted 60 frames per second. Here's what Forza Motorsport 4 and 5 look like side by side. Replays are still only 30 frames even when playing this on the Series X, which is disappointing. Otherwise, graphically, this looks solid for an Xbox One launch title. There's no licensed music whatsoever, which should make this review easy to avoid the copyright stamp. The whole soundtrack is composed by John Broomhall, mostly notable for the Grand Prix series developed by Microprose, and Lance Hayes, who's been a regular composer of the Forza franchise since Motorsport 3 when it took a cleaner, crisper approach to the menus and themes compared to the first two games. And his music reflected that with the use of orchestra, ambience, and light electronic. Though a bit of a surprise, there is no licensed song whatsoever given it's Microsoft who practically have an unlimited budget, so it must have been a creative decision based on the time they had to develop this game.
The 2012 Audi R18 e-tron Quattro, a four-wheel drive hybrid, is possibly the most complicated car to win Le Mans yet.
Unless the money they would have used to put in the music, they used it and then some to bring back Top Gear, including its test track and presenters. Not just the orangutan, but Hamster and Captain Slow. The complete trio appear in Motorsport 5.
If you disagree, you're wrong. Let battle commence.
But instead of describing cars in Auto Vista, they simply describe each championship in the career mode, with the kind of colourful descriptions you'd expect from the TV show. Like, I almost expected them to interrupt what one is saying and start arguing with each other like an old married couple.
But driving a Grand Prix car, as my colleague Richard Hammond will attest, is not easy. He once said nothing could prepare your mind for the assault. For once, he wasn't talking nonsense.
But because it's not just one car that's most likely appeared on the show and you hear the same opinion said in a different way, much like my game reviews, I'll concede, it's a little fresh to hear them describe championships and classes they barely or probably never talked about on the show, like IndyCar or V8 Supercars.
It's a simple choice, steak or prawns, mate. Why make life complicated when the sun is shining and the racing is this good?
As I mentioned before, the Top Gear test track returns, and some of the bonus game modes are Top Gear themed, like competing one-on-one with the Stig's digital cousin. Some say he doesn't put as much of a fight as he should, and that it's just chase cars but with one opponent instead of two with even slower cars.
All we know is he's not the Stig, he's the Stig's digital cousin.
Though the bowling challenge on the test track is pretty fun to compete in, so it's not as dependent on the endorsement as Motorsport 4. Not even a star and a reasonably priced car returns here. But with that said, it's good to have endorsement from a brand or celebrity who actually cares about cars and racing, because you can sense that when they're describing these events. So it's better they're here than not. I've been a fan of Top Gear and the Grand Tour for such a long time. They were a part of my regular entertainment during my high school years and beyond. And though the trio are no longer working together, they'll always be a joy to watch and listen to. As the saying goes, don't be sad it's the end, just be glad you were there when it happened.
You see, a man who senses only how fast or how sideways he's going doesn't care if he's cold or wet or being machine gunned with insects. You and I do, however. So we'd only consider driving cars like these if the upside was intergalactic joy.
It is kind of a shame the presenters don't describe all these cars in the differently named Forza Vista mode, because every single one is available to be walked around and analysed in the same detail in Auto Vista mode from Motorsport 4. Each piece of info can be selected based on which part of the car you're standing, including power, specifications, dimensions, or you just want to view the car from a specific angle, the rear, the front, the rims, or interior. And this mode is only available to the cars you currently have in your garage. Knowing that, it's almost a cheeky way to encourage the player to persevere through the repetitive career mode, so you can buy more cars for your garage and walk around them like they're truly yours. Just to clarify, almost. Aside from the reflections looking a little too exaggerated, Turn 10 know how to design a real-life car into a video game that makes you go, ooh, that's sexy, no matter which one it is. Even the ones you'll likely see all dusty left outside, you know the type. Seeing them from the interior and exterior without a single piece of dust, like it's been in the showroom its entire life, is pretty surreal. You wouldn't believe this game is 11 years old with the way these cars look. If the series is known for one thing, it's being a love letter to cars, and this is another example of that.
The Audi Quattro took advantage of this new technology to dominate Group B rally racing, a new division of auto racing that removed almost all design and power restrictions.
The customization features in Forza Vista basically mesh together, so you need to be in this mode to change the look of the car, including rims, body kits, upgrades, and paint jobs. The material options for the paint feature, it's pretty cool to see things like carbon fiber, camouflage, and gold, like we're getting ARAP money. I did play around with the options with some of the cars in my garage, otherwise most of the customization features are taken straight out of Motorsport 3 and 4, so there isn't much to talk about. Aside from vinyls, which I can't access because the game wants you to make a one-time login before you can access everything offline. But because the servers are shut down, there is no way for the game to give you that chance, so I can't even get any of my cars to look like this, further cementing my hatred for games or features that are online only when they really don't need to be. This might be the worst thing about Motorsport 5. Oh well, like I said before, probably would have been the same as Motorsport 4 anyway, and I am the kind of person who prefers stock body kits and rims on cars anyway. Dan Greenawalt, always taking a philosophical approach to the franchise, he wanted to make sure every single person, whether you're a lifelong racing fan or new to the series, got enjoyment in more ways than just racing. For example, if you pick this car, if that's what you like the look of, we'll auto upgrade it for you and make the playing field even. Or if you like a certain brand like Ford, you'll get rewarded for using their cars, and yet you always have the option to do it yourself manually, almost. Me personally, I like the accessibility as a sim racer, which gives new players a better first impression, even if there are some moments where it holds your hand too much, because even buying a new car for a different event, it also provides all the upgrades to tune it to the maximum while staying in the same vehicle class. So when you look at the opponents, vehicle levels regardless of your choice are pretty much identical. It has the same difficulty options as previous titles. The more driving assists you enable, the less credits you earn. The more you turn off, the more you earn. The only difference here is you lose credits for using the rewind system. Not really enough to discourage me from using it for extra credits, but sure. With the ranking system, instead of earning prize cars, it's just cash, so you have more options for whatever championship you want to compete in next, presumably as a way to get around the reduced number of cars in this game. The cars control well, at least the ones I drove. You can always count on Turn 10 to get the physics right in a racing game, given Dan's attention to detail, particularly on tires. Though it wasn't talked about as much during development of this game. What I noticed after the first few seconds of the tutorial was the way the Xbox One controller vibrates. When you brake in accelerator, it vibrates more on one side than it does on the other. I don't know if that's just me, but it's something that I notice every time I play any other Forza title that came after Motorsport 5. But like the predecessor, it uses a driver task system where the game analyzes your driving style and tailors opponents to copy it. So things like good pass and good corner, the game takes the way you did all those maneuvers, so when you re-enter that circuit again, they'll take the corners in a similar manner. If that's the case, I must be a very dirty driver, because my god, do opponents love to brake test you. Like they're trying too hard to be like, I recognize you on the road. They're basically overreacting to your presence. As you can see on the virtual racing line, they brake way too early, so it always catches you off guard. It makes finishing a race without making any contact with an opponent more satisfying than winning. But hey, it makes the races more interesting at least, and you still have a rewind system if at any moment you take exception to it. I also noticed all the opponents on the track every single race have the same name. I was able to spot it after realizing a few have F1 names. Almost. But otherwise, the game looks and plays very well. It's a solid showcase of what the Xbox One could do graphically going from one generation to another. I can better understand why Turn 10 took the quality over quantity approach, because I honestly doubt every single car can be viewed in this way. I mean, you gotta give them credit for not recycling their previous models from the 360 titles, or at least refining them to the point that they look like next-gen models. But as much as I like walking around these cars in Forza Vista, you spend most of your time on the racetrack, and unfortunately, the lack of content really hurts the overall experience. Now, I don't blame Turn 10 for what we got in 2013 because they were put in a lose-lose position. Do you focus on a small number of content where it all looks properly next-gen, or rehash the older Xbox 360 models? Either way, players were gonna complain. It's a good game on its own merits, but knowing it was rushed to meet the launch date, so there isn't as much content as they could have been, and at the time when Microsoft and the Xbox One were scrutinized thanks to their E3 reveal that year, it didn't have a chance. What Microsoft should have done was swallow it hard, admitted they dropped the ball on the console's unveiling, and gave Turn 10 at least another year to add more content without putting the rest behind a paywall. When you look at the timeline of the series up to that point, even going past 2 generations, there was a Forza Motorsport title every biannual from 2005 to 2017, along with Playground releasing a Horizon title in between. That's a very impressive achievement in itself. And needless to say, Motorsport 5 is considered the worst of the bunch. And having played a little bit of its successor, Forza Motorsport 6, this was basically the real Forza Motorsport 5, the complete edition, with enough content including more cars and circuits with wet weather and night racing. And this makes Motorsport 5 a write-off, honestly not worth having in your collection anymore. A game with less content than any title in the series, and you needed a new console to play it, where the rest of the launch lineup was weak overall. Not exactly desirable. Thanks everyone on Patreon, including Anthony Costins, Bibbs, Brittleback, Cooper Munn, Darcy McIntosh, Emmanuel Figueroa, Eric Barboza, Atmosphere, Indie DM, Alan Craft, Night Kid Gaming, Peter GT, Roman Arteminov, Ruben Perkolk, Sam Sneed, Tickford45, Thomas Rosendale, Will Stokes, as well as everyone for watching this review. Spenny out.